Alright guys, we're in Joshua 10 and 11 today, and it's going to be kind of short today, but going through chapter 10 was fairly long, and then 11 kind of continued on with the same thing. And basically what's happening here is, just like we left off, Joshua is kind of going from town to town, so to speak, and he's taking the land that God has given them. And there's all kinds of stories of him slaying this nation and coming to war against this nation and taking it. And even though that in many cases these nations numerically surpass them, God comes to Joshua and lets him know that, hey, don't sweat it, I've got your back. And even in some cases where God actually rains down hail on the enemies, and ends up, it says that he actually killed more of the enemy with hail than the Israeli army, had killed in battle. So you can see just kind of miracles, or there's all sorts of miracles that are going on in here. So it's certainly worth reading. But after coming against all of these nations, and there's probably 7, 8 of them, there was something that really stood out to me, and it was in chapter 11 verse 20. It says, for it was of the Lord to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle, that he might destroy them utterly, and that they might have no favor, but that he might destroy them, as the Lord commanded Moses. So basically what's happening here is it's saying in the previous verses that Joshua is making war with these kings, and that none of the other nations except for Gibeon had tried to make peace with Israel. Gibeon was the only one that tried to make peace with Israel. And then you remember from the previous video that that they made kind of a deceptive pact and stuff, agreement with Israel, and then that ended up working itself out there. But all of these other nations, none of them even tried to make a pact with Israel. They all just went to battle with Israel despite their reputation. And the reason for that is, according to verse 20, is that God had hardened their hearts to do so. Now, this probably is going to rub some of you Armenians the wrong way, but God does do that. I mean, according to this passage and countless others, when we pray that God's will be done, we are praying that his will be done. Even to the extent that those who God has determined to be judged for whatever reason, that he hardens their heart, and he uses, in this case, the swords of man to bring that judgment on those people. Just like later on we'll find out that God uses Babylon to judge Israel for their idolatry. And so God uses one nation against another in many cases, but once God determines that judgment is to be done, he hardened their hearts so that they couldn't, so that was the only thing fixed in their mind, was to go to battle with Israel, even though God knew how that was going to turn out. So ultimately, what we take from this is that God is sovereign, and ultimately those who know God don't have difficulty with this because they know God's character. I don't have difficulty accepting the idea that God has the ability to both harden and soften my heart, because I know God's character, and I know that what he does is good, and whatever he does, I'm fully accepting of it, and I surrender to it. So anyway, something I wanted to share with you guys. So alright, God bless.